The wind was brutal that night. It cut through everything. It cut through jackets and scarves and skin and bone until it reached the kind of cold that sits in your chest and makes breathing feel like work. Christiana did not feel it. She stood on the narrow steel railing of the Bayonne Bridge, barefoot, her hospital scrubs whipping around her legs like they were trying to pull her back. Her shoes sat neatly on the walkway behind her, side by side, toes pointing toward the road. She had placed them there carefully, the way you place shoes by the door when you come home, like she was being polite about it, like she did not want to inconvenience anyone with the mess she was about to make. Her fingers were locked around the cable wire so tight that her knuckles had turned gray. Below her, the water churned black and cold and endless, 150 feet of nothing between her and the surface. She had looked it up earlier that day on her phone while sitting in her car in the hospital parking lot. She had searched Bayonne Bridge height and water temperature kill Van Kull November and survival rate bridge fall over 100 feet. The answers were clinical. The height was sufficient. The water was 42 degrees. The survival rate was almost 0. She was not crying. She had cried so much over the past 5 days that her body had simply stopped producing tears, like a well that had been pumped dry. Her eyes were swollen and raw but completely dry. Her face was still. Her jaw was set. She looked like a woman who had already made her decision and was just waiting for her body to cooperate. A black Escalade came around the curve of the bridge and slowed. Park Dong-soo was in the back seat, mid-conversation on a phone call with a real estate attorney in Seoul. The call was about a zoning issue with a property development in Gangnam. It was the kind of call that required his full attention. Dong-soo gave everything his full attention. That was how he had built a $2.3 billion legitimate empire across the East Coast before the age of 35. Commercial real estate. Private security firms that contracted with Fortune 500 companies. A luxury hotel brand with locations in Manhattan, Beverly Hills, and Scottsdale. All of it built with discipline and precision and an absolute refusal to cut corners. His driver, a broad-shouldered man named Caillou, saw her first. He slowed the vehicle and said quietly in Korean, "Sir," on the railing. Dong-soo looked up from his phone. He saw the woman on the bridge, barefoot, still, facing the water. He stopped talking to the attorney in Seoul. He did not hang up. The phone just lowered to his side and stayed there. "Stop the car," he said. Caillou pulled over. Dong-soo's bodyguard, a former Korean Special Forces operative named Seung, reached for his door handle. Dong-soo held up his hand. "Stay here, both of you." He stepped out of the Escalade alone. The wind hit him immediately. His dark wool coat caught it and flared behind him. He walked toward the woman, not carefully, slowly. There was a difference. Careful meant you were afraid of what might happen. Slow meant you were in control of what would happen. Dong-soo was always in control. He stopped about 6 feet from her. He did not reach for her. He did not say, "Don't jump," or "It gets better," or any of the things people say when they are desperate and frightened and do not know what else to offer. Instead, he put both hands on the railing, looked out at the water the same way she was looking at it, and spoke. The fall from this height would take roughly 3 seconds. The water temperature tonight is around 42 degrees. At this height, hitting the surface would feel like hitting concrete. Your organs would rupture on impact. It would not be quick, and it would not be painless. Christiana turned her head. She looked at him for the first time. Her face was beautiful even in its devastation. Smooth, dark skin with a warm, fair undertone, high cheekbones, full lips pressed together so hard they had lost their color. Her eyes were swollen but sharp, intelligent, angry even. She said, "I didn't ask you for a physics lesson." He almost smiled, almost. "No," he said, "you didn't, but I figured you should have accurate information before you make a permanent decision." She turned back to the water. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're standing on the wrong side of a bridge railing at night in November without shoes on. I know you drove here in hospital scrubs, which means you came from a shift, which means you have a job, which means somewhere between clocking out and arriving here, something convinced you that none of it was worth continuing." She did not respond. Her grip on the cable tightened. He said, "I'm not going to grab you. I'm not going to call anyone. I'm going to stand right here because the wind is picking up and I would rather not watch someone die tonight." The wind howled between them. Christiana's story was not dramatic in the way that stories on the news are dramatic. There was no single catastrophic event. It was an accumulation, a slow drowning. She was 27 years old. She had moved from Houston to New York 18 months ago for a fresh start, taking a nursing position at a hospital in the Bronx. She was good at her job. She was the nurse who stayed past her shift, who held elderly patients' hands during the night when their families did not come, who memorized medication schedules without checking the chart because she believed that was what her patients deserved. Outside the hospital, her life was collapsing. Her mother, Grace, back in Houston, had been diagnosed with stage 3 kidney disease. Christiana had been sending every spare dollar home. Then 3 months ago, her older brother, Tobias, had called with a plan. He was starting a delivery business. He just needed her to co-sign a loan. He swore on their mother's life. Christiana had co-signed. Tobias took the $47,000 and vanished. The last anyone heard, he was somewhere in Atlanta. The debt collectors started calling Christiana. Her credit was destroyed. She could no longer qualify for anything. She fell behind on rent. Her landlord filed eviction papers. And then last week, her mother called from Houston to tell her the hospital had moved her off the transplant priority list because the family could not demonstrate the financial ability to cover post-operative care. Christiana had been sleeping in her Honda Civic in hospital parking lots for 5 days. Tonight, after a 16-hour shift, she had driven to the bridge, parked, taken off her shoes, and climbed the railing. She did not tell the stranger any of this, but standing there, with his calm voice cutting through the wind, something cracked. He said, "Whatever brought you to this railing tonight happened to you. It was done to you. And dying right now means that whatever broke you gets to win. Permanently. Without you ever getting the chance to fight back." Her jaw trembled. He extended his hand, not reaching for her, just open, palm up, steady. The wind did not move it. A long moment passed. The water churned below. The cables hummed. Christiana took his hand. He pulled her over the railing gently, and the moment her bare feet touched the concrete of the walkway, her legs gave out. She collapsed against him, shaking so hard it felt like her bones were rattling. He took off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. She tried to pull away. He did not step back. He walked her to the Escalade. Caillou had the heat running. Christiana sat in the back seat, wrapped in a coat that smelled like cedar and something expensive she could not name. Dongsu sat across from her. She would not look at him. He asked one question. "When is the last time you ate a full meal?" She could not remember. He told Caillou to drive to his building in Jersey City. Christiana started to protest. Dongsu said, "You can leave whenever you want, but you are going to eat first." She was too exhausted to argue. Christiana walked into the penthouse and stopped breathing for a second. The space occupied the entire top floor of a waterfront tower in Jersey City. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around 3 sides, and the Manhattan skyline sat outside like a painting someone had hung just for the view. The floors were dark hardwood. The furniture was minimal and expensive. Korean artwork hung on the walls, bold ink paintings of mountains and calligraphy in frames that probably cost more than her car. She stood near the elevator door like she was calculating escape routes. Dongsu spoke to his housekeeper, Mrs. Cho, in rapid Korean. Mrs. Cho was a stout woman in her 60s with a kind face and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Within 15 minutes, the kitchen island was covered with food. Japchae, galbi, steamed rice, kongnamulguk. Simple food. Warm food. The kind of food that was made by someone who understood that sometimes eating was the first step back to being human. Christiana sat at the counter. She picked up her chopsticks, realized her hands were shaking too badly to use them, and switched to a spoon. She tried to eat slowly, with dignity, but she was starving in a way that went beyond hunger, and after the first bite, she could not stop. She ate everything on her plate. Mrs. Cho, watching from the kitchen, quietly prepared a second plate and set it beside her without a word. Dongsu sat across the island from her, drinking black tea, scrolling through emails on his phone. He did not watch her eat. He did not hover. He existed in the space with her like it was the most natural thing in the world, like women climbed off bridge railings and into his penthouse every Tuesday. When she finished, Christiana set her spoon down and finally spoke. "I'm a nurse," she said. "Things got hard. I made a bad decision tonight, that's all." He nodded. He did not push. "There's a guest suite down the hall," he said. "There's a lock on the door. You can leave in the morning, no strings." She almost said no. She had been saying no to help for so long that it had become instinct. But she had been sleeping in a Honda Civic for 5 days, and her lower back ached, and she was tired in a way that sleep in a car seat could not fix. She accepted. The guest suite was bigger than her old apartment. The bed had white sheets that smelled like lavender. She locked the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall for 20 minutes. Then she lay down, pulled the covers to her chin, and slept for 11 hours straight. After she went to bed, Dong-soo stood by the living room windows looking out at Manhattan. His right-hand man, Yi-won, called. Yi-won was sharp and lean with a mind like a steel trap. He had been with Dong-soo since they were teenagers in Busan, running through alleyways and learning loyalty the hard way. Yi-won was the only person on earth who could speak to Dong-soo with complete honesty and survive. "You missed the call with the Scottsdale team," Yi-won said. "Something came up." "What came up?" "A woman was about to jump off the Bayonne Bridge." Silence on the line. Then Yi-won said, "And you stopped." The question carried weight. Dong-soo did not stop. His schedule ran with military precision. He was in the middle of a $400 million acquisition deal in Scottsdale, Arizona. There were investors waiting, attorneys waiting, people who had arranged their entire days around his availability. But tonight, he had stopped. "Have someone find a Honda Civic," Dong-soo said. "It should be parked near the bridge on the Jersey side. Move it to a secure garage, and find out who she is." "Who she is?" "She's in my guest room, Yi-won. I need to know who's sleeping in my home." Yi-won did not ask anything else. The next morning, Christiana woke up in the most comfortable bed she had ever touched. For 3 seconds, she forgot everything. The room was quiet. The sheets were soft. Sunlight came through the window in a warm line across the floor. Then it all came back. The bridge, the man, the humiliation of being so broken that a stranger had to feed her and put her to bed like a child. She showered quickly, put her scrubs back on because they were the only clothes she had, and headed for the front door. Dong-soo was already awake. He sat at the dining table in a fitted black crew neck and dark slacks, reading something on a tablet. Breakfast was laid out. Eggs, toast, fresh juice, sliced fruit. He looked up. "Eat before you go." She hesitated. She sat. They ate in mostly silence. When she was done, he slid a business card across the table. It was simple. Black cardstock, white text. Just his name, a phone number, and a small emblem she did not recognize. "If it gets that bad again," he said, "call this number before you go to a bridge." She took the card. She stood. She did not say thank you. She was too proud and too ashamed. In the elevator going down, she looked at the card. She whispered to herself, "Who are you?" She pulled out her phone in the lobby and Googled his name. The first result made her stop walking. Park Dong-soo, the shadow emperor of the East Coast, inside the Korean Empire that runs in silence. She stared at the screen, her heart hammered against her ribs. She looked back at the elevator, then at her phone, then at the elevator again. She walked out of the building fast. Christiana retrieved her car from a parking garage in Jersey City that she had never been to. Somehow, the Honda Civic was there, parked neatly in a reserved spot, the parking ticket already paid. She stood next to it for a full minute trying to figure out how it had gotten there. Then she remembered who she was dealing with and decided not to think about it. She drove back to the Bronx. She picked up a shift at the hospital. She worked 16 hours on 3 hours of sleep, running on caffeine and the stubborn refusal to fall apart again. She showered in the staff locker room after her shift. She changed into the only other set of clothes she had, a pair of jeans and a sweatshirt, and walked to the parking lot. She slept in her car again that night. But something was different. The bridge had not worked. She was still here. And the card in her pocket felt like it weighed 10 pounds. She did not call the number. She was not ready for that. But she also did not drive back to the bridge. 3 days passed. She worked. She slept in her car. She ate from the vending machine in the hospital break room. She did not call him. Meanwhile, Yiwon delivered his report. Christiana Adwale, age 27, born and raised in Houston, Texas. Mother Grace Adwale, a Nigerian immigrant who had supported the family by braiding hair out of their apartment in 3rd Ward. Father, absent since Christiana was 4. One older brother, Tobias Adwale, last known location Atlanta, Georgia, currently wanted for questioning related to fraud. Christiana had co-signed a $47,000 loan that Tobias had taken and disappeared with. Her credit had been destroyed. She had been evicted from her apartment 3 weeks ago. Her mother was on dialysis in Houston and had recently been moved off the transplant priority list. Yiwon read the details to Dong-soo over the phone. When he finished, Dong-soo was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "She went to work the next day." Yiwon confirmed. Less than 12 hours after standing on the wrong side of a bridge railing, Christiana Adwale had clocked in for a double shift at a hospital in the Bronx. Dong-soo said nothing, but the silence carried something heavy: respect. Not the kind of respect he gave to business partners and associates, something deeper, something he did not have a word for yet. 4 more days passed. Christiana was leaving the hospital after another brutal shift, walking through the parking lot at 11 at night, when her car would not start. Dead battery. She stood in the dark lot with her hands on the hood and just breathed. She did not cry. She did not scream. She just stood there, absorbing another blow like her body had learned to take them the way a boxer learns to take punches, turning slightly so they land on muscle instead of bone. A black SUV pulled into the lot. Yiwon stepped out. He was polite and formal, wearing a dark suit with his hands clasped in front of him. He said Mr. Park had sent him. A car was available to take her wherever she needed to go. Christiana stiffened. "How does he know where I work?" Yiwon paused. Mr. Park does not like unanswered questions. She felt the anger rise. She felt surveilled, invaded, like someone had peeled back the walls of her life and looked inside without permission. But she was also standing alone in a dark parking lot with a dead car and nowhere to sleep, and the kind of exhaustion that makes pride feel expensive. She got in the SUV, but she was not grateful. She was furious. From the back seat, she pulled out her phone and dialed the number on the business card. Dong-soo picked up on the second ring. "You had someone watching me," she said. "I had someone making sure you didn't go back to a bridge." The line was quiet, then she hung up. Dong-soo stared at his phone. In Busan, men who controlled entire shipping routes spoke to him with deference. In Manhattan, CEOs waited in lobbies for his meetings. On the phone just now, a 27-year-old nurse from Houston had hung up on him. Yiwon, sitting across the room, watched his boss's face cycle through something he had never seen before. Dong-soo said, "She hung up on me." Yiwon said carefully, "Would you like me to?" "No," Dong-soo paused. "She's allowed." The next day, Christiana showed up at Dong-soo's building unannounced. She walked through the lobby, and the doorman, who had been given specific instructions weeks ago to let her through if she ever appeared, stepped aside without hesitation. She took the private elevator up to the penthouse. She walked in on a meeting. Dong-soo sat at the head of a long glass table with 3 men in expensive suits. Architectural plans were spread across the table. Someone was mid-sentence about structural permits in Scottsdale. Everyone stopped talking when she walked in. 3 powerful men looked at this woman in hospital scrubs and a zipped-up hoodie with fury in her eyes, and her chin lifted like she was about to go to war. She said, "We need to talk now." Dong-soo looked at her, then at his associates, then back at her. He said something in Korean to the men at the table. They stood, gathered their documents, and filed out. One of them, a sharp-eyed man named Mr. Shin with silver at his temples and cold precision in his gaze, looked at Christiana as he passed. The look was brief but loaded. Disdain, wrapped in formality. He said nothing. He did not need to. When the room was empty, Christiana set a dry-cleaning bag on the table. Inside was Dong-su's wool coat, the one he had wrapped around her on the bridge. She had it cleaned with money she genuinely could not afford. "I'm not a project," she said. "I'm not a stray you picked up. I didn't ask for your surveillance or your car service or your people showing up at my job." She took a breath. "I came here to return your coat and to say thank you, for real, for what you did on that bridge, that's it." Dong-su took the coat. He held it for a moment, then set it on the chair beside him. "Sit down," he said. "I'm fine standing." "Then stand, but hear me out." He told her about his private security company. It provided executive protection, risk assessment, and tactical support for high-net-worth individuals and corporations across the East Coast. What most people did not know was that the company also maintained a medical division. They needed someone on call for their Manhattan operations, someone who could handle trauma care, work under pressure, keep their mouth shut, and stay composed when things got chaotic. The pay was $95,000 a year, full benefits, company housing in a secure apartment in Tribeca. Christiana's jaw tightened. "You don't even know if I'm a good nurse." "You worked a double shift less than 12 hours after you were standing on the wrong side of a bridge railing," Dong-su said. "I don't need a resume." She stood there, fighting with herself. Every instinct told her to say no. She had been taking care of herself since she was 16. She did not accept handouts. She did not owe anyone anything. But $95,000, benefits, an apartment, her mother's transplant, her mother's life. She said, "This isn't because you feel sorry for me." "I don't feel sorry for anyone," he said. "It's a waste of time. This is because I need someone and you need a job. It's efficient." She stared at him for a long time. Then she said, "Fine, but I work for you, not with you, and you stop having people follow me." Agreed. She took the job. Within a week, Christiana moved into a furnished one-bedroom apartment in Tribeca. It was simple but clean and safe, and had a lock on the door and a full-sized refrigerator and a shower with actual water pressure. The first night, she stood in the middle of the living room and looked around and felt something she had not felt in months. It took her a minute to identify it. It was hope, small and fragile like a match struck in a dark room. She started the job the following Monday. She worked with Dong-su's security teams, providing medical support during high-profile client events, travel operations, and training exercises. She was good at it. She was calm when things escalated, precise with her assessments, and steady in ways that made the men around her take notice. The security team was mostly Korean. They were initially skeptical of her, but within 2 weeks, after she calmly handled a dislocated shoulder during a training drill without flinching, they began to respect her. By the end of the first month, they had started calling her Doc, even though she corrected them every single time. Mr. Shin, however, was a different story. He was Dong-su's chief financial advisor. He had been with the organization for 15 years. He was traditional, rigid, and deeply uncomfortable with Christiana's presence. He never said anything overtly hostile. He was far too smart for that. But he undermined her in small, surgical ways. He questioned her credentials in meetings she was part of. He forgot to include her in security briefings. He made comments in Korean during group conversations. Comments he assumed she could not understand, about outsiders and distractions, and how the organization was losing its discipline. Christiana did not understand every word, but she understood tone. She understood the way a room shifted when Shin spoke. She understood the cold smile he gave her when they crossed paths in the hallway. She did not complain to Dong-su. She handled it the way she handled everything. She was excellent at her job, and she let her work speak louder than Shin's whispers. What she did not know, what no one in the inner circle knew, was that Mr. Shin was not just a traditionalist with an attitude. He was a traitor. For over a year, he had been feeding information to a man named Yoon Tae-hyuk, an elder in the organization's council in Seoul who believed he should be the one leading, not Dong-su. Tae-hyuk was patient. He was strategic, and he was waiting for Dong-su to show a weakness he could exploit. 2 months into Christiana's new position, Dong-su traveled to Scottsdale, Arizona for the final phase of his $400 million real estate acquisition. He brought his core team, and for the first time, Christiana was included. In Scottsdale, she saw a different version of Dong-soo. At a private dinner with investors at a high-end resort, he was magnetic. He moved through the room with a gravity that made people lean toward him when he spoke. He switched between English and Korean without effort. He smiled in a way that never quite reached his eyes, but made you feel like you were the most important person in the room while he was looking at you. Christiana was stationed with the security team near the perimeter. She watched him from across the room and felt something she had been trying to bury for weeks. It sat low in her chest, warm and inconvenient and terrifying. After the dinner, the team returned to the resort. Christiana was checking medical supplies in her suite when someone knocked. She opened the door. Dong-soo stood in the hallway with his right hand wrapped in a cloth napkin spotted with blood. He had shattered a glass after a tense phone call with the Council of Elders in Seoul who were pressuring him to make concessions to Tae-hyuk. She let him in. She sat him at the desk, unwrapped his hand, and cleaned the cut. A shard of glass had sliced across his palm. It was not deep enough for stitches, but deep enough to bleed steadily. She worked in silence. Her hands were steady and warm. He watched them move with the kind of precision he valued above almost everything else. "You have good hands," he said. She did not look up. "That's literally my job." She bandaged the wound. She was close enough to feel the heat coming off him. She could smell his cologne, something subtle that she had noticed that first night on the bridge and had never been able to forget. He told her about the elders, not details, just the weight. He said he had built everything he owned by walking away from the way things used to be done, and now the old guard wanted to drag him back. He said it like he was talking about the weather, but she could hear the tension underneath. She listened. She did not offer advice or platitudes. She just listened. And he realized, sitting in that hotel room in Scottsdale with a bandaged hand and a woman who had no agenda, that this was the first time in years he had spoken to someone who was not trying to manage him or gain something from him. When she finished the bandage, their eyes met. A beat, 2 beats, 3, the air between them changed density. She stepped back. "You should ice that." He nodded. He left. In the hallway, he stopped walking and stood still for a moment, his bandaged hand at his side, and stared at the wall like it owed him an explanation. That night, Christiana video-called her mother in Houston. Grace looked tired but better. The money Christiana had been sending was making a difference. Grace had been moved back onto the transplant consideration list. They talked for an hour. Grace laughed. Christiana laughed. It felt like medicine. Near the end of the call, Grace studied her daughter's face through the screen and said, "Is there someone?" Christiana said, "Mama, stop." Grace smiled. "I know that face, baby." Back in New York, returning from Scottsdale, the team's convoy was moving through Manhattan near the FDR Drive when a dark sedan swerved hard into the lane beside one of the SUVs and sideswiped it at 50 miles an hour. The SUV carrying 2 security team members spun and slammed into the concrete median. The sedan sped off. One of the men, Hyung-kai, had a deep laceration on his arm and was losing consciousness. Christiana was out of her vehicle before it fully stopped. She climbed into the back of the damaged SUV, applied pressure to the wound with her bare hands, and kept Hyung-kai conscious by talking to him in a calm, steady voice until paramedics arrived. The security team watched a woman they had been uncertain about 3 months ago save one of their own on the side of a highway with blood up to her elbows and not a single tremor in her hands. Dong-soo watched from his vehicle. Yi-won watched Dong-soo's face. Dong-soo said quietly, "Find out who did this, tonight." The investigation pointed to Tae-hyuk's network, but they could not prove it yet. The threat was escalating, and Christiana was now inside Dong-soo's world, which meant she was inside the crosshairs too. 2 weeks after the convoy attack, Christiana returned to her Tribeca apartment after a long shift. She dropped her bag by the door, kicked off her shoes, and noticed an envelope on the floor. It had been slid under the door. No name, no return address. She opened it. Inside was a single photograph. Her mother, Grace, walking into the dialysis clinic in Houston. The picture had been taken from across the street. It was recent. Her mother was wearing the blue cardigan Christiana had sent her for her birthday. On the back of the photograph, written in red ink, "He cannot protect everyone." Christiana's blood went cold. Her hands shook, not for herself, for her mother. Her mother who braided hair to pay rent. Her mother who had never raised her voice at another human being in her entire life. Her mother who was on dialysis 3 times a week and could not run even if she wanted to. She called Dong-soo. She did not hesitate. He answered immediately. She told him what she found. He heard the fear in her voice, and he was at her apartment in 20 minutes. He looked at the photograph. His expression did not change, but his eyes went dark in a way that Christiana had never seen, like a door had closed behind them and locked from the inside. He made one phone call. Within the hour, 2 of his most trusted operatives were on a flight to Houston. By morning, Grace Adwale had 24-hour private security. She had been moved to a secure medical facility in the Texas Medical Center. Grace thought it was just an insurance upgrade. She told her daughter on the phone, "This new hospital has pudding cups, baby. I think I'm going to like it here." Christiana sat on her couch and looked at Dong-soo. "This is because of you," she said, "because I'm close to you." He said, "Yes." No sugarcoating, no deflection. "Then maybe I should leave." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You can. I won't stop you. I'll make sure you and your mother are safe regardless of what you decide. But I want you to stay." The word landed heavy. Want, not need. Not it would be more efficient. Want. From a man who measured every word like currency, this was a fortune. She did not answer that night. She asked him to leave. He did. She spent the night sitting in her living room in the dark, thinking. She thought about the bridge. She thought about who she was 3 months ago. A woman with nothing. A woman ready to die. She thought about who she was now. A woman with a job, a home, her mother's health improving, and something terrifying and real building between her and a man who should not make sense for her but somehow did. The next morning, she went to his penthouse. He was standing by the windows. She said, "I'm staying, but not because you asked, because I choose to." He nodded, but the relief in his face, which he tried and failed to hide, told her everything. That evening, he invited her to stay for dinner. Not a business dinner, just dinner. Mrs. Cho cooked. They sat at the island and ate and talked like 2 people who had forgotten what it was like to be known by someone. She told him about growing up in 3rd Ward in Houston, about her mother braiding hair from 5 in the morning until 10 at night, about the first time she knew she wanted to be a nurse. She was 9 years old. Her grandmother had a stroke in their living room, and the paramedic who arrived was a young black woman who was calm and sure and unshakable, and Christiana had watched her and thought, "I want to be that." He told her about Busen, about his mother, who died when he was 12, about his father, who loved him the only way he knew how, by preparing him for a world that would try to eat him alive, about the day he decided to take everything his father had built and reshape it into something legitimate, and how half the people he grew up with called him a traitor for doing it. They moved to the terrace. The Manhattan skyline glowed across the river. The night was cold. She shivered. He put his arm around her. She leaned into him. He said, "On the bridge that night, you didn't ask me for anything. You didn't ask who I was. You didn't ask for help. You were just going to disappear." "Why does that bother you?" "Because I've spent my entire life surrounded by people who want something from me. You were the first person I ever met who wanted nothing, not even to live." She looked at him. She touched his face. He closed his eyes. He kissed her, slow, deliberate, like everything he did. She kissed him back. It was warm and certain and felt like a door opening to a room she did not know existed. When they pulled apart, she said, "This is going to complicate things." He said, "Things were already complicated." Over the next several weeks, they grew into each other privately. She still worked her position. She maintained her professionalism during operations. But after hours, she was with him. He started teaching her Korean phrases. She cooked him jollof rice from her mother's recipe, and he ate 3 plates and asked Mrs. Cho to get the recipe, and Christiana said absolutely not. This is classified information. They were careful in public, but the inner circle noticed. Yi-won accepted it quietly. The security team respected Christiana too much to gossip, but Mr. Shin watched with growing urgency. He reported the relationship to Yoon Tae-hyuk in Seoul. Tae-hyuk's response was calm. Good. A weakness is only useful when it matters to him. Now we know she matters. Then Tobias resurfaced. Christiana got a call from an unknown number. It was her brother. He was in Atlanta. He was crying. He said he was in trouble. He had lost the loan money gambling and now owed dangerous people. He said he was sorry. He said he needed help. Christiana held the phone and felt the ground crack beneath her. This was the man who stole $47,000 from her. The man whose betrayal sent her to a bridge railing at night. But he was also her brother, her mother's son. The boy she used to share a bed with in their cramped apartment in 3rd Ward when the power got shut off and they had to sleep close to stay warm. She told Dong-soo. He listened without interrupting. Then he said, "What do you want to do? Not what you think you should do. What do you want?" She said, "I want him to face what he did, but I don't want him dead in a ditch somewhere." Dong-soo sent Yi-won to Atlanta. Yi-won located Tobias in a rundown apartment complex, assessed the situation, and discovered he owed money to a mid-level loan shark. Dong-soo had the debt settled, not forgiven, transferred. Tobias now owed Dong-soo, and Yi-won made it clear in person that the debt would be repaid through honest work, accountability, and making things right with his sister. There would not be a second chance. Tobias, sitting across from Yi-won in that apartment, understood immediately that he was dealing with people who did not make threats they were not willing to keep. He agreed to everything. Back in New York, Mr. Shin made his move. He arranged a meeting with Dong-soo under the pretense of discussing financial irregularities in the Scottsdale deal. During the meeting, with other senior members present, Shin suggested that Christiana might be a security liability. Her background, her brother's criminal connections, her access to sensitive operational information. Dong-soo listened without expression. Then he said, "Are you questioning my judgment, Mr. Shin?" Shin backed down immediately, but the words were already in the room. Other men had heard them. The seed was planted, not in Dong-soo's mind, but in the air around him. Shin was poisoning the well drop by drop. Then Tae-hyuk flew to New York. He requested a formal sit-down with Dong-soo, a meeting of respect between an elder and the current leader. Dong-soo agreed because refusing would signal weakness. The meeting took place at a private estate in Alpine, New Jersey, one of the wealthiest zip codes in America. Tae-hyuk was polite, almost warm. He praised Dong-soo's business success. He said the organization was proud. Then he made his demand. He wanted a seat on Dong-soo's board of directors, formal influence over the legitimate businesses. He framed it as the old generation guiding the new. Dong-soo knew exactly what it was. If Tae-hyuk got a board seat, he would get access to finances, contracts, and decisions. He could dismantle everything from the inside. Dong-soo declined, respectfully, firmly. Tae-hyuk's warmth evaporated. "You have forgotten where you come from," he said. "Your father would be ashamed." Dong-soo did not flinch. "My father is dead because he trusted men like you. I won't make the same mistake." The meeting ended. Tae-hyuk left, and within 48 hours, confidential financial documents from the Scottsdale acquisition were leaked to a competing real estate firm. The deal, worth $400 million, was suddenly in jeopardy. The leak came from inside. Yi-won worked around the clock. He traced encrypted communications. He followed digital trails through layers of security, and he found it. Every thread led back to Mr. Shin. Shin had been working with Tae-hyuk for over a year. He was responsible for the leaked documents. He was responsible for the convoy attack, and he was responsible for the photograph of Graced Whale that had been slid under Christiana's door. Dong-soo sat alone in his office, looking at the evidence on his screen. Shin had been with the organization for 15 years. He had sat at Dong-soo's table, eaten his food, shaken his hand. And he had been trying to destroy the woman Dong-soo loved. Dong-soo did not act immediately. He waited 3 days. During those 3 days, Yi-won compiled every piece of evidence against Shin into a comprehensive file. Every leaked document, every encrypted message to Tae-hyuk, every financial transaction that traced back to the betrayal. On the 4th day, Dong-soo called a meeting of his entire inner circle at his Manhattan office. Every senior member was present. Shin was present. Dong-soo stood at the head of the conference room. Behind him, a screen displayed the organization's emblem. He was calm, not the calm of a man who has made peace with something, the calm of a man who has made a decision and is simply executing it. He began presenting the evidence, document by document, message by message, transaction by transaction. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Each piece of evidence landed like a brick, and the room grew heavier with everyone. The men who had respected Shin for 15 years watched the betrayal laid bare in spreadsheets and screenshots. Some looked away. Some stared at Shin with the kind of fury that comes from realizing you have been standing next to a fire you did not know was burning. Shin tried to speak. Dong-soo held up one hand. Shin went quiet. "You compromised a $400 million deal," Dong-soo said. "I could have forgiven that. Business is business. But you targeted a woman under my protection. You photographed her mother at a medical facility. You tried to use the people I care about as weapons against me." He stepped closer to Shin. The room was completely silent. "You're done, not just here. Everywhere. Every professional contact you have, every bank account, every relationship you've built using my name and my resources, I will dismantle all of it. You will leave this building with nothing. And you will not set foot in any city where my name carries weight." Shin was escorted out by security. He did not resist. He knew what Dong-soo was capable of, not violence, but something worse. Complete and total professional erasure. Within weeks, Shin's assets were frozen, his reputation dismantled, his connections severed. He became a ghost in every industry he had ever touched. With Shin gone, Tae-hyuk lost his inside man. His response was swift and vicious. From Seoul, he pressured the Council of Elders to call for a formal vote of no confidence in Dong-soo's leadership. If the vote passed, Dong-soo would be stripped of his position, and Tae-hyuk would take control of the organization. The council had 7 members. Tae-hyuk had 3 votes locked, including his own. Dong-soo had 2 loyal supporters. 2 elders were undecided. The vote would take place in Seoul. Dong-soo had to go. Before he left, he went to Christiana's apartment. He told her everything. The council, the vote, what was at stake. He had never been this open with anyone in his life, and it showed. His voice was steady, but his eyes were not. She held his face in her hands. She said, "You walked me off a bridge. You gave me my life back. Now go fight for yours and come back to me." He pressed his forehead against hers. He said something in Korean, quiet and low. She did not understand the words, but she understood his voice, and that was enough. He flew to Seoul. The council met in a traditional estate in Gangnam. 7 elders sat around a long table in a room with wooden floors and paper screens, and the kind of silence that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. Tae-hyuk made his case. He spoke for 20 minutes about tradition, about legacy, about how Dong-soo had strayed from the organization's roots. He made a pointed reference to Dong-soo's personal attachments, a deliberate shot at Christiana without using her name. Then Dong-soo stood. He spoke in Korean. He spoke about his father, and the room went still because no one spoke about the former leader in these meetings. He said his father built this organization with strength and fear. He said he rebuilt it with vision and discipline. He listed the numbers. Under his leadership, the organization's legitimate holdings had grown from $200 million to $2.3 billion. Every member had health care, legal protection, and a future that did not end in a cell or a coffin. He had done that, not with tradition, with evolution. Then he paused, and he revealed his leverage. He presented evidence, compiled by Yi-won's forensic accountants, that Tae-hyuk had been embezzling from the organization's legacy fund for 7 years. $12 million rooted through shell companies in Singapore. The evidence was meticulous, irrefutable. The room erupted. The undecided elders looked at Tae-hyuk with horror. Even his allies shifted uncomfortably. The vote was called, 5-2, in Dong-su's favor. Tae-hyuk was stripped of his elder title, expelled from the organization. 15 years of scheming and positioning, gone in one afternoon. He stood, humiliated, shaking. He looked at Dong-su across the table and said, "This is not over." Dong-su met his eyes. "Yes, it is." Dong-su's plane landed at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey just after sunrise. The sky was turning gold over the Manhattan skyline. Yi-won was waiting on the tarmac, hands clasped behind his back, looking like he had not slept in 3 days, which he had not. Dong-su came down the steps. He looked tired in a way that went beyond jet lag. He looked like a man who had been carrying something heavy for a very long time and had finally set it down. He asked one question, "Is she safe?" Yi-won nodded. Then he said, "She called 4 times while you were in the air. She didn't leave voicemails. She just called and hung up." Dong-su almost smiled. He went straight to Tribeca. Christiana opened her door. She was wearing sweatpants and a nursing school t-shirt, and her braids were pulled up in a loose knot on top of her head. She had clearly not slept. Her eyes searched his face like she was reading test results. He said, "It's done." She pulled him inside. She held him. He held her back, tight, like she was the first solid ground he had touched in weeks. 3 weeks later, Grace Adwale underwent a successful kidney transplant at Houston Methodist Hospital. Christiana flew to Houston and sat in the waiting room for 6 hours, praying to a God she had been angry at for a long time. When the surgeon came out and said the transplant had gone well, Christiana put her face in her hands and wept. Grace recovered beautifully. She was stubborn about her physical therapy in a way that made the nurses laugh and the doctors sigh. During her hospital stay, she met Dong-su for the first time through a video call. He was polite, almost formal, sitting in his penthouse with his posture straight and his hands folded. Grace studied his face through the screen for a long moment. Then she said, "You're the one who found my daughter." "She found herself," he said. "I just happened to be nearby." Grace smiled slowly. "MMHMM, you're smooth. I'm watching you, young man." Christiana covered her face with her hands. Dong-su laughed. A real laugh, full and warm and unexpected. It was the first time Christiana had ever heard it, and it changed something in the room, like a window opening in a house that had been closed up too long. In Atlanta, Tobias was 3 months into an honest job, warehouse logistics for one of Dong-su's supply chain companies. He was sober. He showed up on time. He was paying back his debt in small, steady amounts. He was not fixed. He was not whole. But he was trying, and for the first time in years, trying was enough. He called Christiana on a Sunday morning. He did not ask for forgiveness. He said, "I know what I did almost cost you your life. I have to live with that every single day. But I'm trying to become someone you don't have to be ashamed of." Christiana cried. She said, "Just keep going, Tobias. That's all I need from you." 6 months after Christiana had stood on the railing of the Bayonne Bridge, Dong-su's organization hosted a private reception at their luxury hotel in Beverly Hills. The event celebrated the successful closing of the Scottsdale acquisition, which Dong-su had personally renegotiated and closed for $415 million, more than the original price, because Park Dong-su did not just recover from setbacks. He profited from them. Christiana attended, not as a staff member, not as a medical contractor. She walked in at Dong-su's side in a deep emerald gown, her long braids swept elegantly over one shoulder, gold earrings catching the light. She was radiant in a way that had nothing to do with the dress and everything to do with the fact that she was standing in a room full of powerful people, and not one part of her felt small. The guests, investors, executives, and members of the organization greeted her with genuine respect, not because Dong-su demanded it, though he would have, because she had earned it. She had saved a man's life on the side of the FDR Drive with blood on her hands and steadiness in her voice. She had stood firm when she was threatened. She had never once used Dong-su's power or money for herself. Dong-su gave a brief speech. He thanked his team. He talked about what it meant to build something that outlasts the people who try to tear it down. Then he paused. He looked across the room at Christiana, who was standing near the back, trying not to draw attention, the way she always did. He said, "And I want to thank the person who reminded me what it looks like to fight for your life, not because it's easy, but because it's worth it." The room applauded. Christiana's eyes glistened. She did not look away from him, she could not. Later that night, after the reception had thinned, Dong-soo found Christiana on the terrace. She was leaning on the railing, looking out at the Beverly Hills skyline. Leaning on a railing. But this time she was on the right side. This time she was not looking down. She was looking out. At a city full of light and possibility and a future she had almost thrown away on a cold night in November. He stood beside her. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. He did not get on one knee. That was not who he was. He set the box on the railing between them and opened it. Inside was a cushion-cut diamond in a simple platinum band. Beautiful, elegant, chosen with care. "I've negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars," he said. "I've faced down men who wanted to destroy everything I built. None of that made me nervous." He looked at her. "This makes me nervous." She looked at the ring, then at him. "Park Dong-soo, are you asking me to marry you?" "I'm asking you to stay, permanently, officially, legally." She laughed, a real laugh, full and bright with tears sliding down her cheeks. "You couldn't just say, 'Will you marry me?' like a normal person." "I've never been a normal person." She took the ring out of the box. She put it on her own finger. She looked at it. She looked at him. "Yes." He pulled her close. She pressed her face against his chest and listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong and certain, the way it had been on the bridge that night when he stood beside her and refused to leave. They stood together on that terrace with the city glowing beneath them and the night stretched wide and open above them. Two people who had found each other at the exact moment they were not supposed to. A man who stopped his car on a bridge because something told him to. A woman who took his hand because something told her to live. Neither of them was standing alone anymore, and neither of them ever would again.